Now before you say anything, yes, he is filler from Z, but that doesn't make him any less awesome. Especially since his dub name is based on pecans. And I like pecans. Hey guys, MasakoX here. Today, we are going back to one of my favourite characters from my time watching Dragon Ball Z back in the day. If you remember from some of our more recent discussions, we have talked about the idea of disruptors. Characters who change the status quo with minimal effort and upend everything that you thought that you knew about the Dragon World and showed you, haha, you know nothing! No kidding, you actually probably know something. Trunks swamping Frieza I'm talking about, Whis swamping everybody, that kind of stuff. Well, there was one I probably forgot to mention. Remember in the Otherworld Tournament filler arc where Goku was just milling around minding his own business and then met the odd couple that is Frieza and Cell, causing trouble? Well, turns out that Goku was having a little bit of trouble himself with those two, and then comes along this guy from West Galaxy and dropkicks super perfect Cell in next to no time without a single power-up. That was the first ever obvious disruptor that my 15-year-old mind could comprehend, and the person that caused this change in the convention of Dragon Ball at the time? Well, it can only be Pikkon, or Paikuhan, depending on your preference in nomenclature. But then we have to remember that this amazing character did not come from the original manga, but instead he was a tool used by the anime team to create some extra action and buy the manga some time to get ahead before we moved into the Buu saga. It was still pretty cool though, and it really fleshed out the other world for us. It was almost like it was preparing us, indeed, for the major disruptor coming up in the next arc. Anyway, our focus is on Pikkon. I'm going to use the dub variation of the name for today's discussion for familiarity's sake as well as the algorithm, but yes, Paikuhan is his proper name, just putting it out there so you know. Today, we will be deviating a bit from our usual movie villain reboot topic, and instead, we're going to talk about rebooting a heroic character. Somebody who actually worked well with Goku in the other world, and I felt that he could have become really good friends with Goku. Pikkon was always an odd one, right from the get-go. Not only was he like what we said, a full-blown filler character, he also acted as a full-blown rival to Goku when our protagonist had traversed to the next dimension. Again. They both were, to be completely honest with you, meant for each other. With the addition of Pikkon in this arc, it meant that Goku had somebody to surpass still, and kept him motivated whilst training in the other world. That old lesson that Roshi had taught him as a kid was still being applied thanks to this quiet, yet pretty amicable West Galaxy resident. Now, to most of us, we know Pikkon's real status in the series, but nevertheless, his identity as a filler character may be a little bit surprising for those of you who would describe yourselves as more casual fans. Now why is that? Well, it's my own personal belief that he's appeared in very significant parts of the anime, the Otherworld Tournament, as well as two actual pretty big movies, Fusion Reborn and Bio Broly. He wasn't a background character either. He was working alongside Goku, really being relied on by Goku, especially in Fusion Reborn, to try and resolve the negative incidents that had transpired in that world. I mean, through comedic means, but this is Dragon Ball after all, is to be expected. Be that as it may, we still have to acknowledge that this character indeed did not originate from the manga. He had no mention in there whatsoever. So, does that mean he was simply an anime creation, that Toriyama had nothing to do with his development at all? Well, not quite. Pikkon does have some roots within the DNA of Dragon Ball in terms of his design. You see, he was designed by Toriyama himself in conjunction with the anime team to help flesh out the gap between the Cell games and the Great Saiyaman saga. Toriyama described him, Pikkon, as a Piccolo type of character, somebody who was quite stern, serious, and most importantly, green. He didn't really intend for Pikkon to be his own character, just really a facsimile of Piccolo in the afterlife, just so that means Piccolo doesn't have to pass into the next dimension or anything. Toriyama really doubled down on that, encouraging the anime production staff to just basically use Piccolo as a reference for the facial expressions. only without a nose. Now that I think about it, is this the true creation of when you fuse Piccolo and Krillin together? Was that demonstration by those two in the actual series a little nod to Pikkon? God, I can never get that out of my head now. And also, you're welcome. So Masako, since this character has appeared a noteworthy amount of times within the anime, and Goku seriously respected his power and usefulness, why do people not consider Pikkon, or Paikuhan in some countries, to be as good as part of the makeup of Dragon Ball? Why don't you just stick him in there? Why not bring him into the main timeline and make some serious bank out of all that popularity? Well, it's not as easy as that. The biggest problem lies in how the otherworld and other realms within are shown in the filler when you compare it to how we see them now. The way those realms are portrayed in Super are vastly different. The way that we saw the underworld portrayed was just a field in Resurrection F, Frieza's own personal realm of punishment. Much more simple. It's just Earth Hiffle, not like a global Hiffle. Frieza was a special case as well, and we didn't get any time to explore the rest of the underworld in Super whilst there, because there was no time, nor was there the need. Goku knew Frieza was there, and therefore, there's no real point making these other backgrounds and scenes and characters, or making callbacks to other characters. Also, I doubt that King Yemma would spring for multiple bad guys being plucked out of their prisons for the sake of a tournament. Frieza got lucky because he was useful, and Goku took personal responsibility. That's how Frieza got what he got. Pikkon is simply not needed. We're not just dealing with that particular chestnut either. We are thinking that there are other things that may have changed in the otherworld between Z and Super. Now, with the current state of affairs, we don't really think the Grand Kai is a thing anymore. He was nowhere to be seen throughout the entirety of Super. Nor, actually, did we see any of the other Compass Kais like South Kai, East Kai, or even West Kai. Not even as a cameo. It was back to the days of, it was just King Kai. That was it. And then we go straight to Shin. It's like they just trimmed the fat of divine beings or something to speed up time, or they just didn't think, or maybe Toriyama forgot. Ha ha. And quite frankly, Haverock and I are afraid to even ask what the current hierarchy is in Super in terms of divine beings. We just don't want to know. It's so different and also very vague. And if the Grand Kai does still exist, where does all this place him in the divine hierarchy then, since it was Toriyama who proposed his design in the first place? It's just a case. Here's a design. Oh wait, I forgot about him. What do we do now? And as for Pikkon himself, although he is indeed incredibly popular, especially with yours truly, there really isn't that much known about him. In terms of trivia, we do know that his Japanese name is based around the meal pork rib rice, or like chashu pork or something like that, and we know that he lived in the west quadrant of the universe and fought valiantly to the end there? That's it. Oh yeah. In a June 27 V-Jump survey, he was voted the most popular replacement for Buu in the Universe 17 for the Tournament of Power. But Frieza brings in the yen to Toei's yard, so unfortunately, the fans' calls for Pikkon to be in the team were heard just about as much as Goku being put in for Smash. And yes, that burn hurts. It even hurts me saying that. In terms of personality, he is very similar to Piccolo, in that he is very matter-of-fact and honest about his thoughts. But at the same time, there is a very noticeable difference between him and Big Green. Pikkon appears to have a shorter temper. He is much more likely to get angry and frustrated, and when he vents during Fusion Reborn, he goes full on rage. And other times though, he does seem to have a very strong moral compass. It's just like he's just got a little bit of a short temper. Though he kind of enjoys taunting his enemies a little, like teasing them, which kind of endangers his existence when he came across Kid Buu. He was playing with fire a lot, much less so than Piccolo would do, so thankfully there is something to distinguish him from the Namekian. He's not just a complete carbon copy. And that's really all there is to say about him. He pops up in the video games from time to time, most notably in Dragon Ball Fusions, when he can EX fuse with Piccolo, but he hasn't been really seen since the movies. Oh, except for Dragon Ball Heroes, of course. That has done its bit to revive him in the form of Super Paikuhan, and he's even made an entrance into Dokkan Battle with the same look and feel, with a modified design signifying that he has trained more and more with West Kai. the Kai's emblem is on his new clothes, so that is a good signifier. And he's also described to be much more mature than when we saw him with Goku in the anime. He has seemingly had some character development off screen though, and he actually looks really cool, like a bandit of the other world. That's pretty cool. But despite these changes in making him feel more adjusted to a modern day Dragon Ball, he's still not shown up in this series proper, or even, as far as I can tell, in Toyotaro's iteration of the manga. So what are we supposed to do with the guy who's not in the original manga, and he's also no longer alive in any capacity, regardless of his status and popularity with the fandom? We've got to try and fix him in some way. But the problem with fixing him for a modern age is that him being around in the show actually really hinges on him being the strongest being who's passed. He has to be dead. First off, what we'd have to decide if we want to make a soft reboot or a hard reboot for this character. It's quite important to think carefully with this. If we do a soft reboot of Pikkon, that requires way more thought. We could try and somehow make sense of the Otherworld Tournament saga and confirm its place in the main story so we make it that it's not a filler arc, which shouldn't be too hard. Maybe give an explanation for the existence of all the villains in said tournament, justify their creation, use the Grand Kai as a figurehead for Zeno and the Grand Priest to bounce ideas off of, like he's their cool grandpa or something? I mean, it's not like stuff like this hasn't happened before in the show's history, as the alternate Yardrat design from Dragon Ball Online has now been, masterfully I might say, integrated into the main story in the Moro arc alongside the original design. There's no designing between the two, you can have both. Let's say that for the sake of this tournament, Cell, Frieza and King Cold were given bodies, and were allowed to participate for some reason, and that Pikkon was always a thing in the show, and his friendly rivalry with Goku is already an established factor within the narrative. It's just a given, it's there, they know each other. So how are we going to put him back into the story if we're just soft rebooting his plot and arc? Well, we could bring him back through a villain. How else would we realistically return him to life? Dragon Balls? Whis? Nah, that's far too predictable. You see, Pikkon's whole shtick of being introduced as someone who's no longer alive has inspired us. It has given us the idea of introducing a new type of villain to the Dragon Ball universe. A proper necromancer. I'm not talking about a Babidi or even a Moro. We're talking about straight up necromancy. Yeah, we can also claim that what Zamasu does in the anime is a sort of type of necromancy, but we haven't really done your classic pop culture necromancer justice, with them commanding an army of deceased minions in the anime. It's time for that. He'd be the baddie's strongest asset, aside from himself of course. And that would put Goku in a rather interesting position. He would be fighting against someone he thought was a friend, but now he's trying to fend him off, somehow break him free, whilst also fighting against him, trying to survive. Not only would this undead Pikkon have the same strength and skill of the regular Pikkon, he was already pretty powerful around the time of the Buu Saga anyway, there's no reason why he couldn't have just improved since then, but all of this dark magic of the Necromancer could boost Pikkon's abilities enough for him to be a challenge for even Blue Goku and Vegeta. Magic is a very unexplored venture within Dragon Ball, so its potential on the whole is pretty big. Moreover, he could finally have some proper interactions with Piccolo, which, you know, would always be something to behold. And yes, of course, this is pure fan service, but I'm sure it could create some rather funny moments with Goku pointing out how they look like twins, their green skin and all that stuff, and hey, oh cool, he's got no nose either, like Krillin, ha 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 ha. In a very predictive manner, we would have the Dragon Team trying to get Pikkon on their side through breaking him out of his control, the Necromancer, and then together they would all try and stop the big bad, they'd all go home for tea, yada yada yada. But surprise, surprise, the undead hordes just don't vanish like they normally do, they've got nowhere to go now. So in that instance, Pikkon could then step up and become their leader, and train them to fight for good, giving them purpose, and a hook to stay within the realm of Universe 7. Maybe take up one of those empty planets that Shin neglected. We could have maybe Pikkon kept around in a similar manner to Broly, with him guarding and helping the weak and needy, maybe even standing up against Frieza from time to time. As for the hard reboot option, that would probably require Pikkon to originate from a different universe altogether. It's not exactly a jarring tactic, since we've now got a dozen universes to play with. Perhaps he could have been introduced during another tournament saga. We all love tournaments. Because with all the universes playing nice with one another, it's totally possible. Because maybe Pikkon could have originated from universe 1 or 12? Then it could make sense, as we didn't get to see him during said tournament, as those universes were exempt due to them being so good. It would be pretty funny if, as a part of a movie or saga, Universe 7 could have been invited to a much smaller and shorter tournament between the 4 strongest universes, like as an oddity or a curiosity. Then they could meet Pikkon, and together with him, solve a crisis that would arise during said tournament. Because we haven't seen one of those in a while, right? Right? And at the end of the day though, Pikkon is a very tricky character to truly flesh out. People love his design, and would like to see more of his heroic deeds, or even how he met his end altogether in the first place. But there really isn't that much to talk about. Maybe if GT never happened, I know that a lot of you wish for that, he might have continued to pop up in movies and eventually found his way into Super. It's hard to say really, but for some reason this Green Warrior fascinates people all the way around the globe. And we can't say that we blame you for this because he is pretty cool. So what do you guys think? Would you like to see Pikkon back in the series proper? Are you happy with him just being a cameo within the games? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!